Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. The City of Yarra acknowledges the voluntary community of the First Owners of this country. Today they are still the custodians of the cultural heritage of this land. Further to this, Council acknowledges there are other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have lived, worked and contributed to the cultural heritage of Yarra. Now we welcome you as well. Most importantly, we welcome you as individuals and members of groups who are supporting this campaign. We'd like to thank Roberto from the Quantock who's been working tirelessly after that with you. And we also have a letter of thanks to the Victorian Association of Banner and Placard Makers. We really should get them up for a bit of money. They're making a fortune out of this campaign. I'd also just like to welcome the Mayor of Yarra Council, Jackie Fristacky, who is here with me on stage. And I haven't checked all the councillors are here, but we're reasonably sure that Councillors Sam Gaylard, Steve Jolly, Amanda Stone, Jeff Barwell, Roberto Galante, Bishop Coleman, Philip Largenus, and Simon Huggins are here. So we welcome them, and we thank the City of Yarra particularly for supporting us in this campaign. Those of you we meet and chat about this regularly now who oppose the Eastern Freeway, and remember that Yarra made sense of community in the City of Yarra. Fitzroy Town Hall supported that campaign. It was lost it, and we did enjoy their support. We also welcome, I saw Richard Wynne, local member of Parliament here, and we'd like to welcome the General Minister for Transport, Infrastructure and extremely skilled ideas, but we can't because he didn't come. We also welcome our very special guest this evening, Alannah MacTiernan, who is on stage here. And probably a response to clear that you understand who she is, but she will be introduced more formally later. And Dr. Sophie Stirrup, who is yet to arrive and is on her way. We welcome the members of the Yarra Public Transport Advocacy Campaign Committee, representatives of all the different community organisations that the Mayor will mention shortly. Just like we expect this evening, you'll be welcomed by the Mayor. You'll hear from Alannah MacTiernan and Dr. Sophie Stirrup. You will also have opportunities to ask questions and also opportunities for you as individuals to make brief statements about the campaign and your feelings. You will also hear from representatives of the different campaign groups as well. There will be a resolution put to this meeting, and if you would like to have a resolution put, could you consider the wording of that now so that we can move smoothly into that. And at the end of the evening, we invite you to stay. There are refreshments up the back, and around the back, you've probably already seen there are a number of tables that give you, each one, an opportunity to get further involved in the campaign. I won't elucidate them now, but we will talk about them later. So, ladies and gentlemen, to officially begin, I'd like to introduce to you Yarra City Council Mayor Jackie Fristacky, who is a passionate supporter of sustainable transport, has represented the City of Yarra over 3 terms since 2002, including serving as Mayor twice, and arrived by bicycle. Good on you, Mayor. There we go. Hang on the rail line.
Welcome to all of you to our historic Fitzroy Town Hall. This hall is being used today for student exams, and the energy of the students is still here with us. And I'm going to talk about the energy we're going to harness today. And I also acknowledge the Fitzroy community as traditional owners of the land that we meet. And thank you so many of you for coming tonight on this cold, wet Melbourne night. It's a sort of cold, wet Melbourne night that we're famous for. But it's sort of night where people are indoors listening to ideas, developing ideas, great creativity and action and plotting. So we we are grateful to the weather for giving us that opportunity in Melbourne. I also acknowledge our special guest, Alannah MacTiernan, who's Mayor of the City of Vincent in Perth, and former West Australian Minister for Planning and Infrastructure, who made the first Mandurah Rail Line happen. She made it happen. We want to make Doncaster Rail happen. And Sophie Stark is the Mayor from the Centre Government's and Management of Urban Transport at Melbourne University. Peter Member, Adam Dancer, thank you for attending, and of course our state MPs, Richard Wynne from Richmond, Greg Barber, and we've got a great collection of people here, former mayors, we've got fellow councils being acknowledged, and I advise that the council's doing full speed, but it reflects what a vital issue this campaign is for the City of Yarra and the City of Melbourne as a whole, and indeed Victoria. I acknowledge the support from other municipalities. The Mayor of the City of Manningham, the end of the Doncaster Line, Councillor Jennifer Yang, is here. We've got support from Stephen Lane, from Councillor Stephen Lane, the City of Melbourne, had the oath, been very supportive. Councillor Tom Milliken is here from Daniel, and he's also the chair of the Metropolitan Transport Forum, which is 23 metro councils covering some 2 million people across Melbourne, and you'll speak later. We've got support from Mayors of Yarra and Warringah, who apologies, but have expressed concern about the negative impacts of the east-west road link on their roads and on their communities. And of course, there's support from many organisations tonight. Connie's been mentioned, but and Gannett from the University and Metropolitan Transport Forum, the PTUA, who we're grateful to for organising Alannah MacTiernan's visit to Melbourne. There's YCAP, Yarra Campaign for Action on Transport, YCAN, Yarra Climate Action Now, HARA, that's the Collingwood Abbotsford Residents Association, the Fitzroy Residents Association, the 306A Group, that's North Fitzroy Hill, the Carlton Residents Association, the Protector of Public Lands Victoria, and finally, Yarra's Public Transport Advocacy Campaign Committee. Huge number of groups have mobilised to support this campaign. So let's give a big round of applause for all of the energy in this world. So turning to the reasons for this meeting, we are here to harness our collective energies, our collective wisdom, our collective work to launch the Trains Not Toll Roads campaign. And that's to support the Doncaster Rail Line and to highlight the folly, I say folly, of the government going down the track of building the east-west road link. Now, Medbank research a few years back identified 95% of Melbournians want more public transport. There's 10% people, young people, less getting driving licenses. They want to use their technology on public transport. They want to use their time productively, whether it's email, whether it's iPhones, whether it's music. And that's the way of the future. People want public transport, they demand public transport. And in response to that community sentiment, the Victorian Coalition Government committed in 2010 to plan building the Doncaster Rail Line. And I want to remind people about the media release the Coalition put out in November 2010. The then leader of the Coalition, and the leader, of course, Ed Bailey, just before he became Premier, announced that the Doncaster shopping town, he said, under the Coalition plan, a new line would link Doncaster to the city via Clifton Hill and north of the city, with consideration of a further link to Ringwood in the east. So 2 projects. First stage, Clifton Hill to Doncaster Hill shopping town. Second stage, on to Ringwood. That was the commitment. We said we'll plan for a rail link to Doncaster to help the people of Doncaster who have been denied adequate public transport by John Brumby. The Coalition said later had 11 years to plan for rail to Doncaster, but failed to do so. Instead, raised money on my head. They went on to say the coalition has listened to locals and will invest $6.5 million in the first 2 years of government to plan for the new rail line. It's now 3 years nearly in government, and we haven't got, we made a stage 1 of the study, which is sending their draft forward. He said, we will consult with local communities and stakeholders on the route and location of new railway stations and maximise the opportunities for passengers to transfer between rail lines to integrated tram or bus services or private vehicles. He said, he supported the line because we believe local families deserve better services. So that was in November 2010, and what happened? It was a clear election commitment, and the $6.5 million was allocated to plan the heavy rail to be built to Doncaster Shopping Town. The election was won on the strength of commitments to extend public transport, great support in Doncaster, Roval Rail, Airport Rail, and of course along the Frankston line. These projects and that of the Melbourne Metro Rail Line have been put on the back burner by focusing on the massive east-west road link project regarded by the state government currently as its highest priority. This is a bad transport project for Melbourne, and let me tell you why. Firstly, it wasn't an election commitment. There's no electoral mandate for that, unlike the other projects. It would exacerbate congestion. It will exacerbate congestion on Hoddle Street, Flemington Road and the inner city. If you get more cars more quickly into the inner city, you're going to exacerbate congestion on roads that are already at capacity. There is no more room. It has no positive cost-benefit analysis or transport logistic justification. Indeed, under the Eddington report, there was a negative cost-benefit assessed of losing 50 cents for every $1 spent on the proposal that was examined in 2006, with a report in 2008. And there's been no strategic justification provided for the east-west road link, other than the government says it's a missing link and it wants to build it. But we have not seen a cost-benefit analysis. We have not seen a logistic analysis. And most of the transport engineers and consultants I speak to a lot, are convinced that it's the wrong project. And they might have to say something different publicly because they're consultants to government, but they say, go ahead with this campaign, you're on the right track, the project should not be a priority. So this is the feedback we've been getting, even for people who work for the Melbourne Linking Authority. Okay? So the fourth point, the East-West Road Link plans to hijack the Doncaster Rail reservation in the Eastern Freeway medium, which is reserved for the Doncaster Rail. It's going to hijack to widen the freeway from Hoddle Street to Yarra Bend to commandeer the rail reservation for the beginning of a tunnel. That's an absolute disaster because it makes the Doncaster Rail project that could be built for $1.5 billion. It makes it a much more complex project with more tunnelling, more length, less cost-effective and less capacity to attract mode share. Our proposal is a $1.5 billion direct Doncaster line to a park and ultimately to the Melbourne Metro University station, Carlton Park, and then straight to the CBD with modern technology, modern signalling, a modern line. That would take 20 minutes. Who would drive if that project was done for that in that way? Instead, the Doncaster Rail study suggests 30 minutes and suggests the bus, the smart bus, is 35 minutes, making the project less attractive. And Alannah MacTiernan will tell you what happened in WA with those sorts of proposals. In terms of the reasons for this meeting, I also want to express sympathy and support for the residents and other members of the community, the businesses in the path of the proposed East-West Road link. They're in the firing line and they're in the dark on the project, being left to speculate on the route and what will happen with their homes and their businesses. That's an untenable situation. You're reading in the paper or on the Linking Melbourne Authority website, and they do not know what is happening. So our support goes out for you, and as a council we'll try and assist you in whatever way we can. Now, turning to introduce our special guest speaker, Alannah MacTiernan. As I said, Alannah is the Mayor of the City of Vincent in central Perth, and she's here in her role as former West Australian Minister for Planning and Infrastructure, who made Perth's Mandurah Line happen. And we've got a lot to learn from Alannah. Her biography records she's actually a Melbourne girl. She was born in East Melbourne, but she went off to study arts and law, as I did, but she went to the University of West Australia, then worked in the Commonwealth Government, good start, and then started her political career in local government, an even better start. She was elected to the Perth City Council in 1988, when she was a councillor until 1994, and then she was elected in the West Australian Parliament in 1993, a bit of an overlap. But she rose to be Minister for Planning and Infrastructure in 2001, and she had that role until 2008. And in her role, she integrated planning and transport, established the Public Transport Authority, and our one emphasis here is modelled to some extent on that, and established the Perth Mandurah Rail Line. She was also instrumental in the extension of the Northern Joondalup line all the way to Clarkson, and that line is being built simultaneously with housing development at the same time. They're both, the rail line's going in, the housing's going in simultaneously. And in her history here, that is what needs to happen in Melbourne's growth. Public transport needs to go in at the same time as the sewage, the same time as the roads. And not 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, as happened in Doncaster. So, let us say that we're very appreciative of Alannah MacTiernan being with us to help us launch this campaign. And again, thanks to Fitzroy for sponsoring Alannah's visit. Now, just very briefly, Alannah's going to talk about the Mandurah Line, but that's some 70 kilometres built for $1.5 billion and highly successful with, I understand, 70,000 passengers, well ahead of schedule. 70,000 passengers a day. Now, it's only, although the Doncaster line is only 16 kilometres, not 70 kilometres, there are a lot of parallels between both lines. Both run down a central median in a major freeway to the CBD. There's similar residential densities requiring transport interchanges with fast cycle routes across the length of the lines. Both serve as a public transport staffed corridor. Now, the Mandurah line is not public transport staffed, and there's moves to develop and link it to the airport, an airport line, which will beat Melbourne. Its construction starting next year, so on an airport line in WA. And both offer huge transport benefits to their entire city. In both cases, opponents have tried to substantially increase construction costs, we've seen that at Doncaster, and substantially increase the project complexities to sabotage the prospects of their success. I presume Alannah will tell us how that happened and how she dealt with that. Now, Alannah MacTiernan's had the political nous, the perseverance and courage to challenge this, work with Peter Newman and other people, like-minded people in WA, stick to her guns, not her knitting, like the federal, but stick to her guns, with the guns of her firepower to get the Mandurah Rail Line built. So please join me in welcoming Alannah MacTiernan to speak on how the West got the MRR built.
Gosh, thanks very much, Jackie, and to all of you here tonight. This is quite incredible. Someone from Western Australia, I feel like one of those Celts from Hadrian's Wall, getting brought in by the Romans to provide advice. Because we've always heard, if you're not from Melbourne or Sydney, you're camping out. So it's quite cute that you might actually think that we've got something that we could share with you. But I do think that what often happens is that when you start further behind, sometimes you then have the capacity to look at things more in a fresher way and make changes that perhaps in more developed systems are difficult. And look, I am really pleased to be here tonight. I mean, it's great to be able to come out here and to advocate for the cause of public transport. Now, I have to say, I'm not anti-road. I'll confess, I've built a lot of roads in my day. But I think we have absolutely, in our cities in Australia, we've got the balance way wrong. And that whilst we have every year automatically a road expansion program, which no one queries, doesn't have to go through the same ERC time process that we have with rail expansion of our public transport network. We've got to turn that around. We've got to build it in so we get out of this cycle of no one doing anything for a long time and then people having to come in and invest an obscene amount of money to actually get something done. This has got to be part of a more orderly, regular program, just the way that we do it and have done it forever on roads. So we've got some very sophisticated system here for transferring the slides. Is that right? I'm doing the right thing? Wait. Just like I'm on top of the IT and pressing a button. But look, if I could just give you a little bit of history, because I think sometimes you need to understand a little bit of the background. And we had a premier in Western Australia who I say is the father of public transport, and that was Sir Charles Court, a Conservative gentleman. Sir Charles Court in 1979 closed down the Perth Fremantle Railway Line. And he, with his, had a friend, Harold Puff, they were going to pull it up and build a nice freeway out there. Now, that actually took Perth out of its support in terms of understanding what being a city. We were no longer a large country town, we're actually a city. What does this thing being a city mean? We had a very primitive public transport system. We only had 3 railway lines that had been built in the beginning of the 20th century. And so we had 3 rail lines, and they were serviced by diesel trains. We still had 1979. We still had these very old diesel trains that just chunk around. And of course, public patronage of the system was, as you can imagine, going backwards as car ownership was improving, and these lines were completely unattractive. And in terms of time and amenity, very uncompetitive with private motor vehicles. So the idea of the Conservatives was you just close them down and replace them with freeway to get rid of the problem. But in doing this, it activated a whole lot of people. It started and got a whole generation of political activists, of whom I am one, to start really thinking about the role of public transport in a city. What public transport does. It's not just about moving people around, it's the whole way in which you form your city around those public transport corridors. It is about how you deliver amenity to the city and mobility to the city. And of course, we had emerging at that time, we had people like Peter Newman and Jeff Kenworthy, who led very much the academic debate and who became a great resource for our community. So that then became an instrumental factor in Labor getting into government in 1983. And of course, they reopened the line. But reopening the line wasn't going to do enough. They then went and electrified the whole system to bring it up to modern standards, new stations, make the thing work, really fantastic state-of-the-art rolling stock. And then, of course, built the Joondalup line that was talked about, did the bulk of the Joondalup line. And again, important principle. That Joondalup line went down the centre of the freeway. That Joondalup line was in advance of the urban front. It was very much focused on ensuring that we were out there when the housing development was occurring. We were out there. People had the opportunity to develop their lifestyle in those northern suburbs around the fact that there was going to be a rail service. And so you can see what happened. We've got the figures down here in 1987, which was just before the electrification. We had 20,000 people a day. By 2007, we had 115,000 a day, and now it's up to around 200,000 a day. So, but just rewinding, so when I was in opposition in the late 90s, in the 90s, and coming into government, we were very engaged on the fact that even though we had made these advances to our public transport system, Perth was still a very heavily car-dependent city. So we made very much our focus turning that car-dependency around, really looking at what we could do to expand our network and address that issue of car dependency and turn this into something that had some of the economic benefits that we see in European cities. So we then developed the new Metro Rail project. It was a very extensive program. It involved us extending the line north so we could keep ahead of that urban growth. And developing the spur line off on Thornley, and developing that whole southwest corridor with a first-class public transport system. Now this package as a whole doubled the size of our rail network and doubled the size of the number of rolling stock. But it was more than, we were thinking more broadly than just putting in the infrastructure, and this was where we did things a little bit better than had been done in Joondalup, because we'd become a bit more sophisticated in our thinking. And we focused very much on building around those railway stations, ensuring around those railway stations that we would have real transit-oriented development, and that we would have the potential also to get counterflow. So, for example, at the Murdoch station, we decided that we were going to build our next, which will be the biggest public hospital in Perth, to build the Fiona Stanley Hospital on that rail line on one of the new stations that emerged from this plan. And as we go down, there's a whole variety of development responses that we've got to really take the advantage of the fact that we've put a rail line in there. We have got a suburban fabric, but we've got these pockets of urbanity that follow the railway line down. Now, just to give you some idea of the successes here, when we did our master plan, sorry, that's the 2007 master plan, we were being very, it's 2002, we were predicting around 25,000. Now, we were trying to be conservative because we didn't want to artificially ramp up expectations. But in our first year of operation, over 50,000 boardings per day. So within a month of opening, we had 50,000. And today, 2013, we've got 75,000 boardings. And in fact, the only thing that's hampered it is the current government, unfortunately, didn't have the foresight to order more trains, which they're now going to do. But I think really one of the very important messages about these figures, about that fact, and what I would like you to compare, is what we were getting when we opened the rail. So 2006, before we opened the rail line, we had a good bus system. We did have a good bus system, good quality buses, and it was a reasonably direct sort of service. But we had only 16,000 people a day were using public transport, were using the bus system. As soon as we opened, that went to 55,000. So within a month, we had created this whole new group of people that were prepared to use public transport. Now I know, and I think this is the important point, because it is often said, no, people just want to drive their cars. Now, what people want to do is they do want to get to work quickly, and they don't want to have an uncomfortable experience. So what you've got to do is actually provide a form of public transport that is going to be competitive with the car. And critically, and I'm not sure I've got mine, no, I haven't got these in here, but one of the key factors was that this railway line from Mandurah to the city, it took 48 minutes. On a really, really good day, you could get to the city in your car in 63 minutes. And quite often it would be an hour and 20 minutes. And of course our bus system took, on a good day, it took 68 minutes. So that ability for us to go out and say to people, you can get there faster on the train, was very powerful. And people saw that on the Joondalup line because, and this is one of the parallels, Jackie, from what you're saying that I think is really fascinating about the Doncaster one. And one of the reasons why I think this whole public transport exercise has now been really comprehensively embraced in Perth is that by putting the rail line down the centre of the freeway, people in their cars actually get it. They actually see the train going, passing them as they are up on the block. And even those who wouldn't be seen dead ever in public transport could also see that those trains are full of people, that if that train wasn't there, they'd also be in cars, and that the problem that they're experiencing would be even worse. So the semiotics of actually having public transport, having a rail system going down the centre of your freeway system is absolutely really important in terms of creating cultural change and getting people to understand very clearly just what the benefits are of public transport. And it is really important that when we sell public transport, when we sell these projects, we make it very clear that we are that not only are the people that use public transport the beneficiaries, but all of those people that stay in their cars are beneficiaries, because the decision by some to go on public transport obviously frees up road space. So it seems to me that that project is really the Doncaster one has got that real potential to create some of that cultural change that has been quite profound in Perth. So you can see one of the other, this is the growth of public transport patronage, and a lot of that growth in buses there, so you'll see the bus was also declining as was rail. But buses have also gone, and it's because we have got a highly integrated system with bus and rail. So the increase in buses, we've taken a lot of buses off that were previously doing the long haul, and the buses are now really focused on bringing people into the railway stations. And I can't stress the importance of that. Now, I'm probably not a purist like some of the people that might be here that doesn't believe in park and ride. I think we've got a suburban fabric, which is the fundamental fabric of our cities. We're changing it to some extent, but that is going to remain the fundamental fabric for some time. I think it is critical that we have park and ride. Park and ride has to be seriously considered as part of the package and paid for. But people will get buses if you have got well-integrated bus systems. Bus systems that actually use timetables, coordinate with the train timetables, and where you can get out of the bus and very, very readily and easily and seamlessly get onto your train. So our railway stations on the Joondalup and Mandurah line are actually built over the centre of the freeway. The buses come up onto the centre of the freeway, people get out and go down a lift or an escalator onto the train. It works really well, and as I say, the patronage figures speak for themselves. People will do it, and they indeed embrace it. And so the next one just shows rail patronage in Perth, the growth trajectory. Now it's possibly a little bit better because we're talking about growth, but you can see how, with these investments, Perth, in terms of its growth, is outstripping the rest of Australia. The cost, we talked about cost before. We were very lucky, 1.7, it came up finally, when I left the government, 1.6, but they've obviously squandered a little bit more on it since the government's up to 1.7. But there's not a person in Perth now that doesn't say that this was a worthwhile project. That I get still, years later, people coming up come to me on a daily basis and saying that this is a fantastic, fantastic system. And so one thing, I'm not sure I did mention it before, but when we opened the line, one of the amazing things that we discovered that we didn't expect is that the patronage on every line went up. But not just on that line, but on the whole lot. And it was because the network was more comprehensive, the network was more attractive. Because there was more places to go, then we saw an upsurge on all the lines. Not so some of that patronage growth wasn't just on the new line. Some of our patronage growth has been indeed on the old line. Now, if I can just give sorry, I'm conscious of not being too long. I want to just talk a little bit about cities and productivity and just some of these the issues. One of the arguments that I used strongly in the fight for money was that when we compare Perth and the amount of money that we were of our locally produced GDP that we were spending on passenger transport, it was around 13%. This is as a community as a whole. When we looked at similar sized European cities that were public transport rich, they were spending about 8%. So you can see the macroeconomic benefits of actually having public transport, that it actually ensures that you can deliver a more cost-effective passenger transport product. And there is, of course, also some really other cost of living issues that we've really got to think about, some economic issues, the personal economic issues. I mean, we have got so many people moving out into, this is happening across Australia, moving out into the fringe of the metropolitan area, because that's where you can get cheap house and land. But if we actually look how much these people are actually, how much of their income that they are spending on transport, it can be up to 19% of their income is actually going on public transport. So we've got this false situation where we focus all the time on housing affordability, and we're not talking about living affordability, because you have to really consider these things together. There's some powerful analysis that has been done in US cities, where you take a place like Houston, where you can carve up any old cow paddock and build houses on it. You don't have to have any amenity, you certainly don't have to have any public transport. And it is at some of the cheapest developable land in the US. But when you compare, and then you have the other end of a city like Portland, where land is quite pricey, but when you add the transport cost in for the average bear, what the total of their land and transport or their housing and transport costs, it is actually Portland that is cheaper. And we've got to think about this. We've also got to think about what I consider to be an increasingly social issue of concern, and that is the amount of time that people are spending commuting and what that is doing to their life-work balance. People are having both persons in a couple are having to work, but they're having to travel these long distances, adding 2 hours, sometimes even 3 hours to their work day. I mean, how do you manage a family with that? And this issue is a bit of a sleeper, but what the impact that is having on our community, on our society, and is, I think, going to be quite profound. It's something that we really need to bring front and centre into this debate about what is the importance of transport and what should we be spending on it. In terms of and if I can just perhaps one final message, is this whole issue about what makes a city a valuable thing in an economic sense, because I think a lot of us make the social arguments, but we don't perhaps always make the economic argument as strongly as we can. And we know in Australia, around 80% of our GDP is actually generated in the cities. As much as I have to say, generally speaking, the bigger the city, the more productive it is. And that's because the reason why cities work a whole variety of skill, a diversity of skill, but also bring together the possibility of really fine specialisation. So you have this complexity that gives diversity and specialisation, bring them together, and there is an enormous fluorescence of economic activity. And the bigger the city, generally speaking, the bigger that impact and bigger that fluorescence. But if your city does not have mobility, you don't have that agglomeration benefit, because in fact you've got a whole heap of separate cities. If people can't move around and readily interact and readily take up the job that suits them best, you don't get that fundamental benefit of being a big city is lost. So there's some incredible, very interesting work that's been done in the OECD on these issues, on the nature of those agglomeration benefits. And one of the things that has been seen is that those many of the third world cities that are now, from developing world cities, that are now investing in things like transport infrastructure are rapidly catching up with the Western or the cities of the developed world. And I guess that's my message from out there, from the provinces, that I think one of the problems that Melbourne has had, that, you go to the 80s, Melbourne and Sydney, like they were top dogs, they had really good public transport, and everyone that came to visit Melbourne came into the centre areas and saw these fabulous trams and said, and in Melbourne in its mind had this view dudes, we're number one when it comes to public transport. And, poor old Perth back there with its little old creaky diesel trains, started feeling really bad and doing stuff, and kept doing stuff, and Melbourne in its mind kept thinking, oh God, we're number one. And suddenly, the rest of the world had moved forward, and Melbourne was still thinking it's number one, but perhaps wasn't any longer quite there. So, guys, can I just say it's been an honour to be invited here to come and see all these people that really, so many of you, and Jackie, who spoke so well about what these issues are. And this is a fight that can be won. Out there in Perth, public transport is a mainstream issue. It's not one of the inner city elites, although, as any other place could be, but it does. Everyone in Perth absolutely understands the importance of public transport, and it is now, no government can be elected with at least promising major public transport initiatives. So guys, keep on the case. I'm sure you'll get there. I'm sure you'll win.
Dr. Sophie Sophie is from Melbourne University and the Gamma Centre. She recently completed her PhD in planning, the Cross-City Tunnel, the Perth Southern Railway, for the Omega project. Omega is a 10-nation study of transport mega projects led by Professor Harry Demetriou of University College London. Her research was recently featured in a major article in the Age. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Sophie Fristacky.
Thanks, I was just reflecting, it's extremely pleasing to hear the word doctor in front of the name of our recent PhD graduate, especially in the forum this London. So, yeah, I'm just really pleased to be here. My research, what I want to talk about today is my research on mega projects. And what I was trying to do in that research was to try to understand the badness of mega projects. Why do we have why do we have these projects that we can't abandon when any rational person would look at them and go, this is madness, and yet we continue with them and spend more and more and more money on them. So I was actually trying to research that, trying to find a legitimate, academically formulated way of understanding what is going on and why do we become so attached to these things. So in doing that, I looked at 3 different. Is it going to get better if I go closer or closer? Okay. So. Closer? I am closer, yes. But you have to turn the sound on, so I don't shout at people. So the issue that I was trying to address was this question of why is it that mega projects consistently run over time, they run over budget, they fail to produce the kinds of benefits which they're supposed to produce, and yet we continue to do them and continue to be attached to doing them. So what I found. So what I found was that mentalities in mega projects have 3 elements, if you like, three sort of features that you can see going on. The next one. The first one is that the logic of power in these projects is sovereignty. It's not democracy. Okay? So these projects are not democratic. They are internal to themselves. They have a logic of power which is somebody with the power to say so said, we're going to do this project. And everything that happens after that is a function of that decision. So everyone's power to do anything in the course of this is now subject to that decision, and therefore is subject to that decision being correct. And people invest an enormous amount of their own personal integrity into these things. So they can't ask the question, should we be doing this? That question was dealt with when the sovereign decision was taken. Now, I'm not saying the sovereign like the king, but when the government says we're going to do this thing, assuming we can sort out all the details like budgets and money and routes and so on, once that's been made, it's incredibly difficult to question, should we be doing this? That question's been dealt with. Right? Important people have said it's true. We must do this. And everybody who's doing anything related to the project has to operate as though that decision cannot be questioned. The second element that we found was that the process of mega projects is dominated by project thinking. And project thinking requires that you encapsulate the object you're trying to create and you keep it as far away from anybody who might wish to disrupt it as possible. Right? Successful project managers will tell you that how you create a successful project is you hive it off away from any kind of political process as fast as possible. You define it inside extremely tightly bound measures, because that is how you will come up with something which is deliverable on time and on budget, and that is the nature of project thinking. So the design of a project manager, the thinking that they're trying to achieve is, what are we building? How do I define it precisely so that I can budget it precisely, I can create a precise timeline for its delivery, and I can deliver it. Now, this is a very powerful technology, don't get me wrong. I'm a project manager myself. I love projects. They're fantastic. There's a whole kind of buzz that you get when you work in projects. They're incredibly powerful at delivering very, very tricky things, as Alannah was just saying, with the Mandurah Rail Line, delivered on time, on budget, by some very, very clever project managers who really did, I think you agree, open their veins to make it happen. But, you know, that's the nature of project management. It has a few issues for you guys, though, which I'll talk about in a bit. So there's this very strong resistance to change of the project. And that comes into play really early on. Project managers don't like it when people start going, well, let's just add a railway. Let's just extend the road another, 15 kilometres. Let's build the City West link and the Doncaster Freeway Railway and, turn this into a project that was actually going to make a difference to, public transport in our city and the structure of our city. No, it's much easier. Let's keep it down to this little thing that we can nice, $6 billion doesn't sound like a little thing. The third thing that we found, or I found, was that problems and solutions in these things go together. So normal people usually believe that what happens is there's a problem, and the government and a bunch of clever people come around and they figure out, well, there's a problem, we should fix it, and so they deliver a solution to fix this problem. That's not really what goes on with these projects. What actually happens is a process of construction of the problem in such a way that the solution which is at hand becomes the obvious thing to do to solve that problem. Now, you can see that process going on at the moment with this tunnel, right? We started off with the Eddington thing. It wasn't about this tunnel. It wasn't about the east. It was about the west. It was about people crossing the Mandurah, right? We now have, it was about a project which was not going to make any difference to traffic in Alannah Rail. It was about a project which was not going to make any difference to traffic in Princes Street. It would prevent the problem that would be created by linking the freeway, the Eastern Freeway, to CityLink, which was an increase in trucks, from harming traffic numbers in Alannah Rail. But it wouldn't actually do anything about the cars because it's an established thing. It was established in the report that car usage was not going to be brought down by building more roads. A new railway would be required to do that. So, that was the old problem. The old problem was lots of people trying to cross the Mandurah River. Now we have a new problem. And the problem is now redefined as traffic bottled up at the end of the Eastern Freeway. The Eastern Freeway doesn't connect, which is somehow just a problem, which needs fixing. Now, if your problem is that the freeway does not connect to anything, then clearly the solution is to connect it to things. But I'm pretty sure that most of the people in this room don't feel that the problem is that the freeway doesn't connect to anything. The problem is that when you sit in your car on the Eastern Freeway, you're in a car park. And when you try to get home and it's raining, or when you try and get here and it's raining, and there's lots of people on the road and there's roadworks in Alannah Rail, you can't get here. That's the problem, right? But that's not the problem that this road is dealing with. And part of what you can see is going on is an attempt to reconstruct the problem so that this tunnel is the solution. That's my word of warning. Okay. So, in terms of the consultation process, what I found was that you have basically 3 phases. Now, there's a small box in between, in the middle there. That's because in Victoria, around the CityLink project in the 1980s, we did do a momentary, almost public consultation on what we should do. Okay? But generally, in the first phase of the concept of consultation, you have problem and solution being constructed. Now, in the main, this is done by experts. This is not done by the public. This is done by people who know better, who run around and think about things, and often they're people who know how to build certain things. And they say, well, you know, we think the problem is this, and the solution is this, and so they construct this whole thing and figure out what we should do. The primary question inside of that discussion is what we should do. In this project, that conversation is over. They're not talking to you about what we should do. That's a problem, considering you don't want them to build a road, you want them to build a train line, right? But be aware, the consultation process that is going on around the East Wells Tunnel is not asking you what we should do. It's asking you, how will you be affected by this road? And how are we going to ameliorate your concerns? And that is very obvious. You can see it in the latest newsletter, to quote, once we have these back, we will review the various ideas, looking at where we can minimise impacts to the community have community consultation and best value for money. Right? So when you engage in community consultation on the tunnel, they're not asking you should we do this. They're asking you, okay, how do we make you feel better about it? How do we figure out whether your houses are going to fall down? How do we figure out whether or not you'll be able to get out in and out of your driveway still? We put the tunnel where we put it, and so on and so forth. Right? That's what they're consulting with you about. And it's very important that you realise how this works. Okay? So the more you protest about where the road goes and where the tunnel goes and what route it goes on and where the hole will be and will I be able to get in and out of my driveway, the more you validate the fact that the tunnel is going ahead. About that. That's right, no tunnel. So I did some preliminary thinking about if I looked through my kind of analysis at the sorts of things that are going on around this freeway, and this is by no means a full study because I've only been at it for a week or so, but looking at the documentation that is around this tunnel and where it comes from, I read through the editing reports and the cost-benefit analysis and the traffic studies and so on. And I have to say, you come to some pretty interesting conclusions when you try to look for what are the continuing stories around coming out of this dialogue, coming out of these kind of reports about this tunnel. One thing that's sort of stark and slightly worrying is that it's been given to the Linking Melbourne Authority. Now, the Linking Melbourne Authority's job has been up until now to build freeway linkages. That's what they know how to do. So what you have in that organisation is a bunch of experts, project managers, who love their jobs and they really like doing what they do. And what they know how to do is build roads. And they don't know anything about how to build a railway. So you've got a big push towards doing a particular thing. And I don't think that you should be fooled into thinking that this is about thousands of construction workers having something to do. Because the construction workers could just as easily be put onto a rail project as they could on It's about project managers and the elite group that are really good at what they do. Right? Don't get me wrong, they are really good at what they do. Some of them were there in the City Link, which was a good project, delivered on time, on budget, delivered what it said it would do. That they've done East Link. I don't know a lot about whether or not that was a good project, but I literally have not studied it at all. But a lot of these people are good at what they do. They will produce. If they come up with a figure and a contract, they will most likely produce this road for the budget that they set inside the time frame that they say they will produce it. Only problem is some people here are not so happy about the road. The second thing that you can see, if you look at these two quotes from the East-West Needs study, so one from page 134. Any expansion of the road network should instead be focused on improving road network connectivity for freight and business travel. That is not peak travel. So, back in 2008 when this report was delivered, what they were saying was improvements to roads are not about peak travel. If you want to do something about peak load travel, you should build public transport because that will and fix up issues of public transport relating to, particularly in that study, the way that the lines going west and north interfere with each other. And the reason for that is because, as Alannah said, if you want to remove lots of cars off the road, you need to put the people in them into a train. I had the most beautiful conversation with one of the transport engineers, the road transport engineers in Perth, about the Mandurah Rail Line. He said to me, each way. And I thought, why can't our road engineers think like that? The Eastern Freeway, the other quote, the Eastern Freeway is another key route. However, it's not utilised by truck freight due to a lack of connection with other freeways and major industrial areas. Now, if you look at this road, the one thing it does do is connect the freeway, make it go somewhere, and it connects it to somewhere very important that the trucks want to go to, and that's the port. So as far as I can see from these sorts of statements, and there are more of them throughout all of the literature, including the most recent public newsletter that was sent to you, this route is primarily about facilitating truck travel and facilitating business travel in the form of small white vans moving things around. The eastern suburbs currently doesn't have a lot of B doubles screaming up and down the freeway, but they're coming. Build this road, they will have a reason to come. The other thing I think that's in play is you don't say no to $1 billion from the federal government. Right? Even though it's a bit like me borrowing $100,000 from my parents, taking $100,000 from my parents and taking out a $500,000 loan when my income is unstable and $70,000 a year, and I'm going to be in debt for 35 years, but the money's there, you take it and use it. This is a big problem we need to do something about. Do I want to say anything else? Oh yeah, just to add to the last thing that Alannah said. She was talking about agglomeration economies. I've been doing a bit of work on developing a computer program that will enable us to look at where agglomerations are in Melbourne. If you look at recent literature by Kevin O'Connor, who's been studying agglomerations in Melbourne for many, many years, he will tell you that Melbourne is made up of 5 areas, 5 kind of lobes that stick out from the centre of the city. And people actually work and live in those areas. And they're quite happily doing that. That was backed up by the data in the East-West Tunnel study. It said, as most of you would probably feel fairly comfortable with, about 12% of people are trying to cross, going up, people ending at the freeway and going up Alannah Road. About 12% of those coming down the Eastern Freeway are trying to go west of Racecourse Road. Right? That was the East-West study. As I understand it from the newsletter that you were all sent by the Linking Melbourne Authority, apparently that's not true. New studies have been done, which we don't have access to, but apparently the figure is actually that 12% of cars going down the Eastern Freeway are trying to go into the city and everyone else is trying to go west. I'm not quite sure whether, as I said, I've not seen the data on that. Apparently that is what the latest traffic modelling says. It's a little bit interesting that one can completely reverse the numbers, but maybe it could be true. Traffic modelling is not an exact science, as Alannah's data showed. Okay. So, on to this question of sovereignty and democracy. So when you question a sovereign decision, you question the right of the sovereign to make decisions. And that is no non-weighty thing. Right? It matters that the government is able to make decisions matters. Sometimes they need to make decisions. Right? So if you're going to set yourself up to say that sovereign decision is wrong, you want to be aware that you're questioning the right of the government to make sovereign decisions at all. And it's not a non-weighty thing to take on. Right? One of the reasons why sovereign decisions get taken by governments or are allowed to get taken is because we don't take responsibility. We like it when someone else takes responsibility. So if you're going to set up an interruption to the government's ability to decide for us, then we need to make sure that we're willing to make clear what it is that we want to be decided on. Does that make sense? That was a bit of a government sentence. Okay. The other thing about sovereign decisions, they're not about rational debate. They're not made, the attachment to, we've made this decision so we're going to go ahead, is not subject to the traffic numbers, the size of the tunnel, the amount of money, or any of that. Right? It's about, but we're the government, we get to say. So the sovereign is only going to change their decision if it's established by a higher power that is the right thing to do. And that's by voters making it clear that you're going to say on this issue. And you're not just going to retreat into the dark after the next election or after the next poll. It's going to take really challenging that, establishing that the voters will not put up with this. So I have one last one. A word of warning from one of the protesters about CityLink. Someone who definitely got drawn into arguing about the kind of road rather than should we have the road. They did after a while give up and then got into smokestacks, size of bike length, etc. She says this: I think if you're objective the whole time you're saying what you're saying in terms of making the world a better place, and maybe not in a single reference, they furiously possibly believe that they are making the world a better place in making it easier for trucks to go from one end of the city to the other. So you've got to remember here, their rationality isn't yours. It's not going to be. They believe as passionately in what they believe in as you do. So in the end, it's going to come down to numbers. And that's all I can say.
Thank you very, very much, Sophie. And ladies and gentlemen, this time is creeping upon us. I'd just like now to introduce a video. It's Paul Meads, and many of you would know Paul. Paul's walked hand in hand with us over many years in support and advocacy of public transport. And some of you would know Paul at the moment is quite ill, but still wanted to make his contribution to this meeting. So sometime in the last 24 hours he recorded this for you to see and hear.
I'm sorry I'm not able to be here in person, but thanks very much for the invitation to speak briefly. The East-West link, if built, would be the most expensive thing that the Victorian community has ever engaged in, far more expensive than the City Loop or the Snowy Mountain scheme or anything of that kind. Now you might imagine that in a well-run organisation that you wouldn't engage in an expenditure of this magnitude without checking absolutely that it was value for money. Now in the case of the East-West link, we have checked to see whether it was value for money, and it was found that the benefit-cost ratio was 0.5. In other words, for every dollar invested in the project, you only got 50 cents back. Now that should have been the end of it, and we should never have heard any more about this project ever since that conclusion was reached, because it means that it's a waste of money. Even before we get down to the environmental damage and the promotion of additional car use, the project is simply a waste of money. And the logic is that we should turn instead to alternatives that have better returns on investment. And those alternatives are rail, because for all its faults, rail produces much, much higher returns on investment. This side of the project corridor to Doncaster over the far side to Tullamarine Airport, but also the upgrading of existing rail services on lines like the Werribee line so that more passengers can be carried at higher speeds and therefore higher percentages of people who live in those areas will choose to use public transport to get to work. Now, this sort of thing is not rocket science. This is how every city in the world that's had to deal with a population of 4 to 5 million has had to deal with its transport problems. The only cities that have chosen alternative paths are places like Los Angeles, and it hasn't worked there, and even they are now turning to rail to try and provide answers for themselves. So I wish this meeting every success because this project is really about the future of Melbourne. If $15 billion is invested in the East-West Link, or even $8 billion in the eastern half that they wish to build now, there will be no money left for any substantial transport projects in Melbourne for at least a generation. So that means that whatever your favourite rail scheme is, whether it be the North-South Rail Tunnel or the Doncaster line or the airport line, none of those projects will be able to proceed because there won't be enough money for them. That's why we have to stop this mad scheme. This mad scheme that even on the government's own analysis can't produce a proper positive return on investment, and that's why we have to ensure that transport policy moves away from roads and in the direction of rail and excellent public transport.
It's a very powerful voice to have on our side. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to open the floor to questions. As I said earlier, we're running a bit tight on time, so we'd ask you to have questions. We may, at the end, offer you the opportunity of making a statement, but this is specifically for questions to anyone on our panel. Now, I'm sure there should be 2 microphones. Yes, we've got those, one over here. And anyway, so if you've got a question, quickly shoot your hand in the air, we'll get a microphone to you. Wouldn't you know they'd be right down the back? It's like a relay race. Go down the back. Oh, you've got one at the front, okay. Is there a second microphone? Oh, okay, look, I might get you to perhaps come to the back half of the room. Thank you. And you will have, oh, you've got a microphone, thank you.
My name's Cynthia Kelly. I just wanted to ask you, Sophie, you mentioned about if there's $1 billion offered from the federal government, you take it. I just wasn't sure factually what that's about, because I understood that the federal government wasn't going to be funding a tunnel, but would fund a railway.
Well, to clarify, the Labor Party. The Labor Party, if they were to be re-elected, would fund the rail tunnel. The Liberal Party, if they're to be re-elected, will fund a road tunnel. I suspect that our government in the state of Victoria is operating on the assumption that the Liberal Party will be, in fact, returned to power, or put in power.
And so next is.
She's for Sophie as well. It's Marianne Pearson speaking. How are you, Sophie? What I was interested in is the thing you said is there's 2 conversations out here. There's a conversation that has already been decided on, is that we're going to have a tunnel, and that we actually want a different conversation, is to have the railway. Have you got any ideas on how we can alter their way of thinking, so that we can actually have what we want, rather than what other people have decided?
Thanks. Advice. I think what you have to do first is establish that you had another conversation. And this meeting is the beginning of that. Launching this Trains Not Roads campaign is central to establishing an alternative dialogue. I think it's also really important that you be aware when you engage in their dialogue that you can't be co-opted, right? If you look at two children arguing, the one that wins is not usually the one, or not necessarily the one that convinces the other. What happens is that the other starts arguing about their point of view. And before you know it, everyone's in the same conversation, and it's not the conversation the loser wanted. You see what I'm saying? So if you start having an argument with the government about this road, and that it's, there's being built in the wrong place, that it's got too fast cars going through it, that you don't want them to tear up Royal Park, all you're doing is validating the notion that you're going to build the road. If you want to create an alternative conversation, you have to refuse to have a conversation about the road and talk about the training. When you go to a public meeting about the road, you say, why are we talking about the train? We all want to talk about the train. Why are we talking about this road? Let's stop talking about the road and talk about the train. Be really annoying.
Can I just make a comment, sort of coming at this from a slightly different angle? I do think it is important that you make public transport a mainstream issue, that you make public transport an issue that is, as I say, not just for inner city people, but it actually becomes part of the language of the whole community. And just an observation, only an observation. I guess if you're focusing your campaign on stopping a road rather than on building a rail, I'm not sure you'll do that. I think it really is about getting out there and being very positive about the alternative and really having the focus on not stopping something, but actually on doing the thing that is much better. There's historical evidence that, particularly in the United States, that was an issue, and I think it was Paul, the name of the gentleman, Paul, talked about the Los Angeles experience, and quite clearly in a situation like that, there was a whole, almost one might say, conspiracy to pull out the public transport system that they have and replace it with roads. But I don't think in contemporary Australia that really is the problem. And I think in a way part of the challenge in Australia is to really get people to understand that public transport, there's a bit of a thing about public transport maybe being a welfare thing, like it's not, like, well, I can afford my own car, and so I don't need public transport, but it's really educating people on just what the benefits are of public transport, showing them how it can actually deliver such positive outcomes. So I really think the problem is more not so much those big conspiracies anymore, although they did historically have a role. It really is about getting people to start thinking about what life could be like how we can get some of those incredible benefits that we see in European cities, where it's just so easy to move around your city, and where it is possible to have a life where you don't actually have to travel 2 hours to and from work each day, and just getting people to focus on those benefits. That's why I say it's got to be a really positive campaign. We've got to get out there and sell the real positive lifestyle positives of public transport.
Paul Group, and Paul Mears in another context would say so, both in manufacturing, in servicing, in a wide range of areas. And my understanding cost $250,000 was subsidy for each employee in the motor vehicle manufacturing industry in Australia. They're a big cost, but if you look at the overall investment, and Alannah was we're putting it appropriately, if you look at national productivity, Australian transport costs are the highest in the world. They're higher than the US, they're higher than Canada, they're higher than Europe, they're higher than your wealthy Asian countries. And the reason for those high costs? Because 95% of the transport task is sole occupant vehicles. It's very inefficient, where only 1% of the energy that goes into the vehicle, in building the vehicle, goes to propel the driver. The rest is sunk costs. That is a major economic argument. I think we've got to contest the fact that there are jobs in the motor vehicle industry and it's jobs in the construction of freeways. There are far more jobs in rail and in public transport. There are far more jobs, just as many jobs in construction, perhaps a bit less because you only have to have 2 lines, not 8 lines on a freeway. That is a fundamental argument, and we have to focus on that, and I think both of our other speakers are absolutely right on doing that. We've got to bring our costs down, and then the argument is it will illustrate productivity. I don't think the government, a lot of the MPs don't understand that. If you bring your transport costs down, and Alannah demonstrated that, you increase state productivity, you increase national productivity, and our productivity is stagnant and going backwards.
How do you change the conversation from we have to invest, if the government invests in a road here, it helps people in Pakenham because all road investment is good for drivers. What Alannah very clearly showed is if you invest in rail, it frees up the road for people who want to use it despite the rail. So rail investment is good for drivers. It's not bad for drivers. It's not us and them. We like bicycles.
Just time for a couple more. Before we just take the next one, we're going to hear, following these questions, from representatives of the major groups involved in the campaign. So just to speed things up, those people who intend to speak on behalf of their different groups, could you please assemble down the front as we take the next question? And there's one there I can see, and you've got the microphone already, yes?
My name is Richard Chapman. I just have a question for Alannah MacTiernan. The recent Western Australian state election was probably, you could describe, fourth on issues about rail transport and public transport generally. Unfortunately, we know where that landed, so I guess what advice would you have for non-government parties about to contest or who may be contesting elections in the near future that would help engage that general population in the need for rail transport? And also, did you get an apology from the West Australian newspaper for their opposition to the Mandurah Line?
No, we didn't actually. As I said, for 4 years it was like living on the song, trying to build that rail line. But look, just on the critical point, interestingly, in Western Australia, you might think it looked like that was a bad election result for public transport, but it actually wasn't, because the Labor Party went to the election. The Labor Party was a long way behind, and they started getting traction where they came with a very, very bold public transport, heavy rail network solution. And it really was getting to captivate public imagination, because people got really excited about all these rail projects that we've been building in Perth. So the Conservative government actually had to come out and make a number of election promises. They promised to build a rail line to the airport, and then they had to come and promise they're going to do a great big long mega light rail project. The only thing is that people didn't actually realise that after the election there was fine print that said if 80% of it is actually provided by the federal government. But nevertheless, I think what that election showed is that people in Western Australia are really expecting, you can't go to the public without having a very good public transport package to excite the voters. So it wasn't always, and that's why I say this. That I don't know whether the culture of Western Australia is just very different from Melbourne. But I say, I think you win more by exciting people rather than scaring them.
Time for one more question, so we're going to like this. If I'm going to take that one, Joe, I do apologise, but you may have a chance after the meeting to talk individually to our panellists.
My name is Mary and I'm from the Manningham Council. I'm not a councillor, I'm on the Residents Rail Advocacy Committee. My question is about the kind of pressure that we can put on the government or how we can change the conversation. I think we need activities that are much more active, that involve people like this public meeting here tonight. I think if we want to be really annoying, the thing that really annoys politicians is to demonstrate, to organise rallies and so forth, to put pressure on the trade unions that will be involved in the construction of roads and point out there's more jobs available, etc. So do the people on the panel agree that we should be trying to organise activities that involve many people? I think that will really annoy politicians and change the conversation.
Yeah, but again, I think it is absolutely incredibly important to get people engaged and out there and active. But again, I go with this conversation. I mean, if your conversation is that you want to annoy someone rather than want, because I think that Sophie's, what Sophie was presenting, so a lot of what was quite powerful there. People sort of locking behind a decision. Mind you, we did that in public transport as well. Locking behind a decision and go out there and go into bat for it. I really do think that the best way is to get everyone really focused on what we are missing out on. This is the really good thing that we could have. Have your campaign that really focus on building that excitement and interest about the alternative. And you know, and addressing some of the sort of practical problems. I had very interesting discussions this afternoon at the PTUA about how some of that congestion that is currently being seen as an impediment on expanding the rail line, the rail congestion in the inner city loop, can actually be dealt with a creative use of high technology signalling, that you can actually get a much better bang for your buck, and that you can actually have this really good result for less money. And I'd go out and activate the public, get them, have deliberative democracy forums, get everyone really excited about what it is you could have rather than the negative.
I would like to ask everyone in this room to talk to at least 10 people and let them know the arguments that the East-West Road Tunnel won't solve congestion, will make congestion worse, and the only way to solve congestion is to build the Doncaster Rail. That will ease the pressure on the Eastern Freeway and on Hull Street. So I would like everyone in this room to have that talk. Alannah's going to make another suggestion. Before I do, I just want to say that Roddy is going to tell you about all the other things that you can do in terms of sign competition. And so that's coming, all the things that everyone in this room can do. But I would like everyone to talk to as many people as possible and to spread the word. We need your support. We can't do it on our own as a council. We've got a wonderful collection of organisations. They're all talking to other people. We need to build the momentum. So thank you for your support.
Look, I'm sure you've got a lot of people here that have got very advanced IT skills. I mean, the idea of actually preparing an audio-visual that shows the train going down the centre of the freeway, the sorts of stations that you could have, actually giving people, enabling them to visualise, perhaps using some of the footage from Perth and saying, this is how they've done it, we can do it like that. So people start to see what it is that you're really talking about and just how well it could work.
Okay, thank you. Now, I need to use my personal microphone on the understanding that you have between 1 and 2 minutes. 2 minutes, you've gone, and please introduce yourself and the group you represent. Thank you.
My name is Ian and I'm a representative of Yarra Climate Action now on the Trains on Toll Road Committee. There's many reasons to conclude that this toll road is a poorly conceived waste of scarce public resources. White Pen is concerned about the environmental and climate change consequences of further shaping of our city and adding more CO2 to our unbalanced atmosphere. To quote Beyond Zero Emissions, if we can cut Australia's dependence on private vehicles in half, we can save $2 trillion over the next 30 years. That would have been spent on inefficient and highly polluting system that we currently have. White Pen has people in the hall tonight, and we'd be delighted to chat to you about what we can do for climate change action and this campaign. We're very proud to be part of a broad coalition of community groups advocating rational transport solutions, and we call on you to join us in this campaign. We commend Yarra Council for its support of our community on this important issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, good evening. My name is Tom Alec, I'm a councillor at Mandurah. I'm also the chair of the Metropolitan Transport Forum, a collection of 23 councils in Metropolitan Melbourne who advocate for public transport, and Manningham and Yarra are very active members. But there's a lot of things being said tonight, but there's one item I want to talk about, that was the CSIRO's report a few years back, where they predicted by 2017 petrol prices would be $7 a litre. Just imagine what that's going to do with the public transport demand and the road demand across Melbourne, and how this could be a massive white elephant if it's built before it's even finished, if that prediction comes true. But I also want to talk about the Auditor General's report of 2011, where they said that Victoria, and Melbourne in particular, needed to spend $30 billion on public transport in the next 10 years, or $3 billion per year, just to keep pace with the population growth. Last year, this government spent $600 million, this year it's $500 million. We're falling behind public transport all the time, and if this project goes ahead, it will suck up every dollar for all councils for years to come. And why am I concerned about it? From a Banyule resident's point of view, there are people from the Manningham area who congest our roads, who park in our local streets, and take up the capacity of our rail network because they do not have a rail system. You cannot blame them. If you live in Manningham, you do the same thing. If they build a rail line to Manningham, I believe they should, it will reduce congestion on our roads, reduce parking in our streets, and free up capacity on our road. So it will be a good thing right across Melbourne. I think, and I don't disagree with that, I don't think they are as passionate that they believe that this project will give them the outcomes they want. I actually believe that they think this gives them an electoral advantage. And they're only doing it because they think they'll win in the ballot box. And it's up to us to spread the word right across Melbourne that this will hurt them electorally, and that's the only way we'll stop it.
I'm Adam Badge. I'm the Member of Parliament for Melbourne, which has the dubious honour of being the electorate that contains all the proposed entries and exits of this link, not only in the eastern side but on the western side as well. Looking here and seeing how many people are here, I feel supremely confident that this thing will never happen. For many of us who are here, this is a bit like Groundhog Day, and you'll remember that about 6 odd years ago, we fended off this proposal under the former state Labor government. Now the Liberal government's picked up the idea and run with it. They're putting a lot of money into making it look like it's going to happen, but not one single dollar yet into construction, for all the reasons that you've heard. We've got to make sure that they don't steal the march on us by making this seem as if it's inevitable. It's not. We are going to stop it. we have to make sure that this is not Victoria's next desal project. And it'll be all the people in this room who are doing that. I completely agree with Alannah. I think that if you've been lucky enough to travel around the world, you know you've been to a good city if you can get around without having to use a car. I fundamentally believe Melbourne can be one of those cities. It's our job to go out there and sell it to everyone else, and I'm lucky to prove it's going to lead us to it.
Off you go.
Julian Will from Protectors of Public Lands Victoria, and of 80 environment, heritage and community organisations. And just to say, this is with a sense of deja vu, we're here again fighting the freeway and campaigning for Doncaster Rail. We've been there before, we've done this before many times, thousands of you. 2003, going back to 1994, but 2003, the Northern Central City Corridor study scrapped. The Eddington Review was going to be included in the Brumby 2008 Transport Plan. It was deleted, and when I said why, they said that's people power for you. So I think that we can do it again. And I think that it's very inspiring that the Yarra Council has led this extremely inspiring campaign, and I think we should continue. The price is so high. The East-West Link, the biggest project in Victorian history, will destroy inner Melbourne. Heritage streetscapes, but also completely delete residential areas. It'll be demolition of Royal Park and will be carved up, and the institutions in the park, Melbourne Zoo, State Netball and Hockey Centre. Yes, the urban camp will be badly affected. So we thank Yarra Council for leading the campaign and wish everybody well with the future campaign.
Thanks, Julianne. Tom Gill from the Fitzroy Residents Association. We had a couple of petition days in Quantock Street and Smith Street recently to support the Yarra Council's campaign here. We had an equal amount of local residents and also tourists from other suburbs. It was quite unanimous and everybody supported the campaign. The attitude of the Fitzroy residents is that we've had a good history of 150 years so far. Another 150 planned, and now is not the time to either push roads through or to dig tunnels under Fitzroy. That continues from the past, and we thoroughly look forward to having more trains. A big comment that people made was the word Doncaster should hopefully be changed one day to just say everywhere. We'd like to see trains running all over Melbourne. And our last point is, although the government has sovereignty, we have eBay. If they keep drilling in Fitzroy, they're going to find some very unusual soil samples and endangered animals to do with.
Hi, I'm Freda Watkin and I'm from the Yarra Campaign for Action on Transport. And I'm probably going to repeat everything, but I'll try not to. We're supporting this campaign, we're involved with the City of Yarra because we're committed to amenity for the people of Melbourne, and that includes Greater Melbourne and the workability and livability of the city into the future. And we really think that this is actually a seminal argument at this point in time for that livability. As a reminder, we fought this in 2008. How did we fight it? We got together collectively, we worked collectively, and we said from the very beginning, this is a
a political campaign, and this is a political campaign. Make no mistake about it. The government is throwing heaps of information at us, costs, lines, types of transport, etc. Forget it. There's only one message, and that message is trains, not toll roads. Thank you.
Just a very quick word from the Public Transport Users Association. We've been working to change the conversation on transport in Melbourne for nearly 40 years now. We used to have 4 Bs as our president. Sadly, now you've only got this guy. My name's Tony, and I'm very glad to see so many vehicles spilling out of all into the corridors tonight. It's a really great show of force, and I should make a point. Not everyone here is from the inner city. I've met people in this hall from all over Melbourne, and that's really important because it's not purely an inner city issue, as our panel has made quite clear. I think the PTUA and myself are really honoured to have been able to bring the wonderful Alannah MacTiernan over from Western Australia to talk about how just to finish with a very quick pitch, obviously Alannah hasn't come for free. It obviously costs money to run campaigns. The PTUA is completely a member-funded organisation, and we have sign-up sheets on the back. If you're not a member, please consider joining our organisation. And thank you, Alannah. Thank you, all of our panel. Thank you, Yarra Council, and let's go and get it.
My name is Jackie Fristacky. I'm the mayor of Mandurah. So, on behalf of the Mandurah community, I just want to say Doncaster Rail is a priority. It's a priority for our community, for Mandurah. And Mandurah needs a rail, and we need a rail through to Doncaster Hill. The demand for public transport is here already in Mandurah. The Doncaster Rail has been proven by the state government to be feasible. And now it's a time for the community to voice up, to send a clear message to state government that we need a rail link and more public transport options in and around Doncaster now. We need a commitment to timing. We need to planning now for the future. We don't want to congest your roads, but give us a rail. Thank you very much. Please, we need you all to go behind us to support the Doncaster Rail. And please go to our Facebook site, Doncaster Rail, and like it. We need everyone to stick together. Thank you very much.
Finally realised that it's time to spend some money on transport for this huge and growing city. It's the largest city in Australia by land area at the moment, and now they've decided that at least $15 billion is worth spending on accommodating the movements of people around the city. The tragedy is they think that $15 billion is best spent on a handful of kilometres of more road across our city, a small fraction across the centre. The opportunity is that with $15 billion, you could build 10 Doncaster rails. Oh, we don't need that. With the rest of the money, you can upgrade the city and across the whole network. That's every single local government area covered in Melbourne, plus road build, plus airport link, plus upgrades to Melton, and a whole lot of others. If you want to know how, then how this all stacks up. I'm happy to explain in more detail, but these are the messages that have to get out to the whole of Melbourne, that this affects everybody, and this is an opportunity to lift the status of public